Damon Reese was 37 years old the afternoon his wife handed him a manila envelope in their kitchen and told him without meeting his eyes that she needed him to sign. He had been home for 11 minutes. He still had sawdust on his forearms from the work site, still had the particular ache in his shoulders that came from a full day doing the labor he used to only supervise, because supervising required a company and the company was gone. He set down his water glass. He looked at the envelope. He looked at Nicole, who had arranged herself near the counter with her arms folded and her phone beside her hand, and the expression of a woman who had rehearsed this moment and wanted it to be brief. Inside the envelope were divorce papers, filed 2 weeks prior in Mecklenburg County. He had not been served because she had used the wrong mailing address, their old address on Pembroke Drive, the address they had moved from 18 months ago, and he only knew this because the envelope was hand-delivered and had a return from her attorney's paralegal in the upper left corner. He read the first page. He read the second. He set the papers back on the counter, aligned them with his thumb, and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. The grass needed cutting. He had not cut it in 3 weeks because he had been working 14-hour days trying to save something that had already finished dying. The business had taken 4 years to build and 4 months to collapse. He did not yet know, standing in that kitchen, that it would take 11 months to rebuild into something 3 times its original size. He did not know that the project that would rebuild it was already waiting for him, already funded, already bearing his name on a contract he had signed 6 years prior and nearly forgotten. What Nicole did not know, when she handed him that envelope, was how many zeros were on that contract. What she did not know was that in 11 months she would call his number 61 times in a single day, and that he would answer none of them. What happened next would cost Nicole everything she had decided she was finished with. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The business had been called Reese Site Systems, and at its peak it had run 12 crews across the Charlotte metro area doing commercial grading, drainage, and site preparation work that most people never thought about and that everything eventually required. Schools needed it before a foundation could be poured. Distribution centers needed it before steel could go up. Hospitals needed it before a single brick was laid. The work was invisible and essential, the kind Damon had understood instinctively since he was 11 years old, walking job sites with his father, Walter Reese, a man who graded earth for 30 years in Greensboro and who told Damon once, smoothing a slope with a hand rake the way other men smoothed a tablecloth, that the ground beneath a building was its first and last argument about whether the building had any business being there. Walter had died of a heart attack in 2014, 3 years before the business launched, 3 years before he could have seen what his son built on the foundation of everything he had taught him. Damon thought about that with some regularity. He did not consider it a sad thought. He considered it an honest one. He had met Nicole at an industry mixer in 2016, the year before he launched. She was in commercial real estate, which meant they moved in adjacent worlds, and she had the particular confidence of a woman who had learned to read a room quickly and perform well, inside whatever it required. He had liked that about her. He had liked her laugh and the way she asked follow-up questions in conversation, and the way she did not seem to need him to be anything other than what he was. They had married in 2018, the year Reese Site Systems cleared its first million in revenue. She had been, in those early years, genuinely proud of him. He had believed that pride was unconditional. He would come to understand that it had been indexed to the revenue numbers, without either of them recognizing it clearly enough to name it. The collapse had come quickly, the way structural failures come quickly after the conditions for them have been building slowly for a long time. A general contractor on a large hospital expansion project had gone into receivership mid-project, taking with it $340 in contracted payments that Reese Site Systems was owed and had already spent to mobilize. The line of credit that should have bridged the gap had been called by the bank 3 weeks later, a casualty of an internal risk review that had nothing to do with Damon's performance and everything to do with timing. 2 key crew foremen had left for a competitor in the same month. Insurance premiums had spiked at renewal. The business did not fail because Damon made bad decisions. It failed because several bad things happened in the same 90-day window, and there was no cushion left to absorb them. He knew the difference between those 2 things. He spent some time being certain Nicole knew it too. He would later understand she had already moved on from that question entirely. By the time the company formally dissolved in October, she had been distant for 6 months. He had attributed it to stress, to the household strain of watching the business struggle, to the particular loneliness of being married to a man who was working 80 hours a week, trying to stop something from happening that was already happening. He had been too close to it to see her distance for what it was. The envelope had been filed in September, before the company officially closed. She had filed while it was still struggling, not after it had already failed. He stood in the kitchen for a while after she left the room. The grass needed cutting. His shoulders ached. The papers were aligned on the counter. He went to his truck. He sat in the driveway for a long time, not starting it. He thought about his father smoothing a slope with a hand rake. He thought about the ground beneath the building being its first argument, about whether the building had any business being there. He had good ground. He had always had good ground. He opened the glove box and removed a file folder he had been carrying there for 6 weeks, a folder he had retrieved from his office during the dissolution and placed in his truck with the intention of reviewing it and then not reviewed. He opened the folder. He looked at the document on top. It was a contract executed in 2018 between Reese Site Systems and a public-private development consortium called the Piedmont Corridor Renewal Initiative. The contract was for site preparation and drainage services on a mixed-use redevelopment project spanning 11 city blocks in West Charlotte. The project had been in the planning and approval phase for years, the kind of long-runway public project that moved at the speed of municipal bureaucracy and federal permitting and could disappear or suddenly arrive without much warning. It had not disappeared. Damon had received a notice of project activation in August, 6 weeks before the envelope, forwarded to his email by a project administrator at the consortium who was unaware that Reese Site Systems no longer existed as a going concern. He had read it once and not replied because in August he had been trying to save 12 crews and a line of credit and had not had the bandwidth to think about what a notice of project activation on a 2018 contract might mean now. He read the contract figure in the document. He read it again. The project value allocated to site work, $2.1 million, with a 40% mobilization advance payable within 30 days of contractor confirmation of availability, $840,000, available within 30 days. He sat in his driveway and held the folder and listened to the neighborhood settle into early evening. His hands did not shake. His face remained perfectly calm. He understood, with the particular clarity of a man trained to read the ground before anyone else arrived, exactly what this was. He reached into his glove box and retrieved his second phone, the one registered to the holding company he had established in 2017 at his accountant's advice for tax separation purposes, the one Nicole did not know existed because it had never been relevant to their daily life, and he had never found occasion to mention it. He looked at the contact he needed. He made the call. "Bernard," he said, "I need you tomorrow morning. I have something I need you to look at." Bernard Elway had been a business and contract attorney for 26 years and had helped Damon structure the original Reese Site Systems entity in 2017. He was a compact man in his late 50s who wore reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and spoke in the considered sentences of someone who charged by the hour, and had therefore learned to make each sentence carry weight. He read the contract. He read the project activation notice Damon had printed. He read the dissolution documents Damon had brought as context. He set everything down. The contract was with Reese Site Systems, he said, which is dissolved. Correct. But the principals are assignable under the original agreement. Section 14, Subpart C. The consortium built in assignment provisions specifically to protect against contractor insolvency mid-project. He tapped the page. They anticipated this kind of situation, which means if you form a new entity, we can make an argument for assignment of the contract to the successor entity on the basis of identical principles and capabilities. How strong is that argument? Bernard looked at him over his reading glasses. With the original principles, the original bonding capacity, and documentation of equivalent operational capability, strong. The consortium's interest is in the project getting done. They have a timeline. They don't want to rebid. They want a contractor who knows the work and can mobilize fast. Damon nodded. "There's another thing," Bernard said. He turned to a page near the back of the contract. This was executed before the dissolution. The consortium's advance payment obligation was triggered by project activation, which occurred in August. The question is whether the activation notice was properly received. I received it. In your personal email as the principal of record. Bernard set down his pen. They sent it to a principal. The principal received it. The dissolution of the operating entity does not necessarily extinguish the principal's rights. Under a contract that contains assignment provisions and was fully executed prior to any insolvency event, he paused. I'm going to need a week to research this fully, but I will tell you that I have seen worse arguments win. What do I need to do in the meantime? Form the new entity, today if possible. Do not respond to the consortium yet, and do not sign anything your wife has sent you until I have reviewed the full marital estate picture. Damon looked at him. I saw the dissolution, Bernard said. I did not see a prenuptial agreement in your file. There wasn't one. Then I need to know what she knows and what she doesn't before we make any moves. Bernard took off his reading glasses. Do you know a good matrimonial attorney? He knew one. He had her number from a referral 3 years prior that he had hoped never to need. Her name was Claudette Marsh, and she had been doing matrimonial and asset litigation for 18 years, which meant she had stopped being surprised by anything somewhere around year 5. She was a tall woman with close-cropped natural hair and the quality of total stillness that very effective people sometimes develop, the ability to absorb a large amount of information without any of it appearing on her face. She reviewed the divorce filing. She reviewed the dissolution documents. She reviewed the 2018 contract Bernard had flagged. She filed in September, Claudette said, 6 weeks before the dissolution was final, before the collapse was fully public. She looked at him steadily. She filed while the business was still technically alive, before there was a final accounting, before the estate picture was clear. Yes, and she is not aware of the second holding entity. Not as far as I know. Claudette was quiet for a moment. The contract, she said. What is the total project value to you if it assigns? He told her the number. She wrote something on her legal pad. She underlined it. She filed when she thought she was leaving a man whose business had just collapsed, Claudette said. She has no idea she may have filed right before it came back considerably larger. She set down her pen. Mr. Reese, I need you to do exactly nothing for 30 days, except let Bernard work on the contract assignment and let me review the full marital estate. Do not respond to her attorney. Do not sign. Do not move any money or open any accounts in your own name. Can you do that? Yes? Good. Where are you staying? Truck, mostly. I have a friend with a guest room. Claudette nodded. She did not comment on this. He had 3 people he trusted completely, and the third was his father's oldest friend, a man named Curtis Pruitt, who had worked beside Walter Reese for 20 years, and who now ran a small equipment rental operation in Gastonia, and who had, when Damon's business began to struggle, offered resources without being asked and been refused with gratitude. Curtis was 63, with forearms like bridge cable and the habit of saying more with silence than most men said with sentences. He met Damon at a diner in Gastonia on a Tuesday morning and listened over coffee while Damon laid out everything. When Damon finished, Curtis was quiet for a long time. She filed in September, he said finally. Yes, while you were still fighting for it. Yes. Curtis looked out the window at the parking lot. Your father fought for things, he said. He didn't always win, but he never filed on himself. He turned back to Damon. You are your father's son. You fight. You rebuild. Whatever comes out the other side is yours. He reached into the pocket of his work shirt. He set a folded check on the table. Operating capital, he said. Pay me back when you can. If you can't, don't. The check was for $50,000. Damon looked at it. He did not pick it up immediately. Curtis, he said. Don't, Curtis said. Your daddy would have done it for mine. Now drink your coffee. The new entity was registered the following Thursday under the name Reese Groundworks, LLC. Bernard filed the contract assignment request with the Piedmont Corridor Renewal Initiative the week after that, with documentation of principal continuity, bonding credentials, and a letter from Curtis's equipment operation confirming available fleet capacity. The consortium's project attorney responded in 9 days. The assignment was approved. The mobilization advance, $840,000, was payable within 30 days of the approval notice. Damon sat in his truck in the parking lot of the attorney's office and read the approval letter twice, and then set his phone on the dashboard and sat quietly for a moment and said nothing to no one. He went home to Curtis's guest room. He called his two best former foremen and told them he had work. Both said yes. He called no one else. Back at the house he had shared with Nicole, Damon had been careful to stay quiet. He had gone back twice to retrieve tools and work gear, both times while she was out, both times without taking anything beyond the practical. He had not moved money. He had not opened new personal accounts. He had done exactly what Claudette and Bernard told him to do, which was nothing visible for 30 days. On the fourth day back, Nicole called him. He answered. She asked how he was doing in a voice that contained, beneath its surface, slight patience of a woman waiting for a practical conclusion to arrive at its scheduled time. He told her he was fine. He told her he was working. He told her he would be in touch with her attorney. She said that was good. The call lasted 4 minutes. He had sat in his truck afterward and thought about all the information she did not have, arranged in his mind with the same systematic attention he gave to a drainage plan. Knowing where everything would eventually flow, knowing what the ground would do with it, he did not feel superior about this. He felt something quieter and more specific. He felt ready. The contract assignment approval arrived on a Thursday. He had said nothing to Nicole. He had said nothing to anyone outside of Bernard and Claudette and Curtis, who already knew. He had gone about his days with the unremarkable steadiness of a man doing the preparation work that no one watches and everyone eventually stands on. On the 31st day, Nicole's attorney received Claudette's formal response to the divorce filing. It was 92 pages. She filed when he was down. She found out the ground was different when he stood up. The deposition was held in a conference room on the 7th floor of a building in uptown Charlotte on a Thursday in March. Damon arrived with Bernard and Claudette. Nicole arrived with her attorney, a man named Hartley, and her sister Brianna, who had been allowed to attend as personal support. Hartley had prepared for a proceeding involving a dissolved business and a modest shared asset base. He had not prepared for 92 pages. He had not prepared for Bernard's contract assignment file or Claudette's marital asset trace, which included, among other things, documentation that Nicole had transferred $24 made from a joint savings account to a personal account in the month before filing, a transfer that had not been disclosed in her initial asset declaration. He had not prepared for the forensic accounting summary Claudette's associate had produced, which showed 4 additional smaller transfers across a 7-month window totaling another $11,200. Hartley asked for a recess before they had been in the room 45 minutes. They came back. The tone had changed. Claudette set the contract approval letter on the table. She set the consortium's mobilization advance confirmation beside it. She set the new entity registration beside that. She walked through each document with the same unhurried precision she brought to everything. Hartley said something about post-separation business formation. Claudette walked him through why the 2018 contract predated separation by over 4 years and why the assignment of that contract to a successor principal entity did not constitute the formation of a new marital asset but the preservation of a pre-existing contractual right. The room was very quiet during that portion. Nicole looked at the documents. She looked at Damon. Something moved across her face that was not easily named. It was not quite regret. It was the particular expression of a person who has made a large and confident decision and is understanding, for the first time, the full dimensions of what that decision cost. She leaned toward Hartley and said something quietly. Hartley looked at the contract figure and said something back. Brianna put her hand over her mouth. Damon watched all of this. He said nothing. He was not performing calm. He simply was calm, in the way a well-graded site is level, not because nothing happened to it, but because the work had been done correctly. I think we're looking at a different conversation than the one we came here to have. Hartley said. Yes, Claudette said. I think you are. The settlement was agreed 3 weeks later. It was fair, documented, and final. Damon did not feel the need to enumerate precisely what Nicole received and did not receive, because it was handled by people he trusted and it was done. She called 61 times the day the mobilization advance posted to the Reese Ground Works operating account. He did not answer. He was on a job site in West Charlotte, walking the first graded section of 11 city blocks with Curtis beside him, both of them in boots in the morning light, looking at ground that had been properly prepared for whatever was going to be built on top of it. He let the calls go to voicemail. He did not listen to the voicemails. Curtis said nothing. He did not need to. 14 months later, Damon was sitting on the porch of a house he had purchased in a neighborhood in South Charlotte, a modest house with a good yard and a workshop he had been building out in the garage with the patient, after hours' attention he'd brought to things that were purely for himself. The concrete pad he had laid was level to within an eighth of an inch. The framing was plumb. There was no part of it that would need to be redone, because he had done it right the first time, which was the only way he knew how to work. He was drinking coffee in the early morning. The Piedmont Corridor project was 60% complete and on schedule, which in the world of large public infrastructure meant it was running about as well as such things could run. He had 2 other active contracts and a third in final negotiation. He had 8 crews. He had, for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, enough margin that he was not tracking every line item daily from a posture of fear. A woman named Renata sat at the porch table across from him, reading something on her phone, wearing his old work jacket because the morning was cool. She was a landscape architect who had come onto the Piedmont Corridor project as a subcontractor in month 4, and she had asked him a direct question on their first site walk about the drainage grate on the north block that had indicated she actually understood what she was looking at, and they had been talking with increasing frequency and depth ever since. She was not loud. She did not perform. She asked good questions and then listened to the answers. He had told her about the collapse in the contract and the 61 calls. She had listened to the whole thing without commentary. When he finished, she had said simply that the ground sounded like it had always been solid, and he had thought about his father and the handrake and agreed. The workshop was almost done. He had laid the concrete pad himself. He had framed it himself. He had, in the way that mattered to him, built it correctly, which meant he would not need to worry about it later. The morning came in over the yard the way mornings come in over work that has been properly done, without drama, without ceremony, with only the simple and sufficient fact of light. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.